podcast, here to recap the NFL Combine, which she attended and has some very interesting stories. So we'll get into all of that right after this. Stay tuned.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the show. As I said, I got a very special guest, Steph, here with me today. How you doing?
Doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm good. And one part of the NFL, busy part, that's over. We got free agency. I mean, we've heard a couple of the franchise tag talks, extension talks, and all that kind of stuff. But I want to focus on the NFL Combine today because you were there last week, and it seems like it was a blast for you. Before we start talking 49ers related stuff, just tell us about your experience, how you enjoyed kind of going out there for the first time, and all that.
It was an awesome experience. I had gone to the Senior Bowl last month or so, and I knew that it was going to be just like a way bigger version of that in a sense, just like the amount of people and just like the type of networking you do. But I think even I underestimated it a little bit. It was just, it was really cool. I liked Indy downtown, a pretty cool area, and just getting to know people, shaking some hands, getting to network and, uh, also just interviewing players. Like, I feel like that's something that I improved on like as the week went on. And so that was a cool experience for me just as I continue to grow and building, I guess, media chops. That was definitely a highlight for me. And of course, getting to meet John Lynch, right? Like, who doesn't want to do that? So altogether, it was a great week. I'd definitely do it again.
Hey, that's great to hear. I mean, I saw the John Lynch part earlier today, and I mean that's a very cool story. But it all in itself, I mean, it seems like just a bunch of NFL heads all in the same location for the entire week. Seems like a very cool experience. And let's start off with some of the earlier position groups. Who was there? Was the first day Tuesday or Wednesday that drill started?
Uh, well, I think it started Tuesday, but that day was just GM interviews.
Hmm.
And I wasn't coach interviews, and I wasn't there that day. I got there Tuesday night. So Wednesday was my first day, and that was defensive linemen,
Right.
and DBs, I believe. So
Yeah. Defensive, I mean, those two groups, defensive lines deep, DBs had a couple of very cool prospects. Let's start there. What did you think about the defensive line group? Just the initial outlook, and then a certain couple of players that you thought intrigued you.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a group I think the 49ers are going to be looking at. I feel like, again, like you said, it's a very deep defensive line class, and I think there's a lot of guys that the 49ers would potentially be interested in. Just from the ones that I was able to gather, just like, Brad Graham, the SF Niners was able to gather, and Jordan, like Byron Young from Tennessee, one of the players the 49ers met with. Dante Still, Zach Pickens, DJ Dale, Isaiah McGuire. I know his name is starting to pop up a little bit more as well as people, start doing more research on players. Akena, and a Chukwu, I think I'm saying his name right, hopefully. And
From
then
Rice, right?
yes, yeah. And then there's is it Baywar or Bawar?
Oh, a devil war, right?
A Devil Ware. He's a beast. I mean, I don't think he's going to be in the 49ers range at this point.
Mhm.
He met with all 32 teams throughout the process. So definitely someone who's a freak of nature. I would love to have him on the 49ers, but I just don't see it happening just based on just how much his stock has grown throughout this process. But
Right.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of guys there for the 49ers to be interested in. As far as the DBs go, like Jalen Skinner, I was bummed, that to hear that he tore his pec.
Yeah.
Definitely someone who shined for me at the Senior Bowl, so I was really looking forward to seeing him, show off his athleticism at the combine. But of course, he wasn't gonna be participating. He may participate in his pro day, is what I gathered. So hopefully there's still a chance that we'll get to see him there. But definitely a guy I think the 49ers would probably be interested in. And again, we'll just have to see if he would even fall to their range. It might be one of those things where you have to move up into the second if you really like him. But he's someone who I think would fit in really well with what the 49ers are wanting to do. Another, safety that I liked and I got a chance to talk to was Daniel Scott out of Cal. A guy who's not going to get a lot of mention. He's 25, so he's definitely one of the older prospects. So that right there for a lot of people is going to be like a no, take him off the board kind of thing. But if you look at how he tested, I believe his RAS score was in the 9 point something, right? So definitely has the athleticism to make you at least consider, despite the age, bringing him in. He told me he met with the 49ers briefly, so that was probably an informal, but definitely be on the lookout for him to potentially, be at the local pro day for the 49ers because, the Cal
Right.
connection. So, yeah, just keep an eye on him. Jamie Robinson as well out of Florida State. Another guy. He said that was a meeting that stood out for him, meeting with the 49ers. So that to me tells me that the 49ers had extra interest in him because most of the time when you ask a player what are some of the teams or the meetings that stood out to you, I don't hear the 49ers mentioned often. It's usually like Ravens, Steelers, like the same teams over and over. But usually if a team stands out to a player, it's because they have legit interest and they're kind of they get that feel that there's interest, right? So Jamie Robinson definitely one of those guys. And uh, I don't, as far as how he tested, I think
He
he
was all right, I believe. I know he ran just a smidge under 4.6.
yeah.
So he's like in the Hufanga range in a way, where he'll have, I think, pretty solid short area burst. I don't know about long speed necessarily, but yeah.
Yeah, so that's another guy, but definitely they're looking at, DBs, right? Like they met with Riley Moss formerly as well, who looked really good actually. He tested well. Darius Rush as well. Mekhi Blackman out of USC. And the 49ers, they like their USC guys, right? So keep an eye on that. Jay Ward out of LSU as well. So yeah, I mean they're definitely going to be in the DB market. And it'll just be interesting to see like who they end up picking up.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I agree. Yeah.
but as far as like some of the other positions, like if you were to ask me what seemed to be like the position they're most into, definitely tight ends. Got the sense that they met with all of them, or if not most of them.
Hmm.
A lot of offensive linemen, of course. And for the offensive linemen, like it seemed like they're looking at a lot of centers, and not just centers, but like also versatile guys that could play multiple positions on the line. I fell in love with Jake Andrews out of Troy. I did see him at the Senior Bowl. He was a bit of a mixed bag there, but he did well in one-on-ones. It was more so like when he was getting into the like the 7-on-7, 11-on-11s kind of thing. There's a lot of weird snaps, but I kind of at this point I'm chalking that up to that being, they didn't have a lot of reps together, so maybe the timing is just off when you're thrown into a situation like the Senior Bowl. But like I said, in one-on-ones he did well. When I interviewed him, he was one of my favorite interviews. Jake Andrews was, and he just gave me like really good in-depth answers. You can tell like he was really interested in the questions, and just answering them. And yeah, it just felt good. And he mentioned that the 49ers met him at Troy a couple times, so like they traveled out to Troy to see him, which I think was notable. Um, and he met with them at the Senior Bowl as well. So, now a couple meetings with the 49ers at this point. Also, a guy that Jim Nagy, because Brad spoke with Jim Nagy at the combine. He asked him like who would be great fits for the 49ers as a right tackle. He mentioned Blake Freeland
Break
out of
free. Yeah.
BYU. So definitely a name to keep an eye on. And Freeland did meet with the 49ers as well. So that's just another guy to keep an eye on. Sorry, I feel like I'm I'm like talking so much.
I'm getting all the information, so I'm good. But continue
And
forward.
the tight ends, though, a very exciting group of guys. Like,
Right.
this may be the deepest tight end class in a really long time. And so after watching them, do their drills and everything, I came away with the thought that I think I'd be happy with any one of them. I haven't watched the tape on a lot of these guys, so take that for what it's worth. But just as far as the athleticism that some of these guys have, you can tell that they're going to be in the NFL, right? So guys like Payne Durham was a guy who I liked at the Senior Bowl, so happy to know that he met with the 49ers at the combine. Braden Willis was someone who his interview was interesting because he told me when I asked him about the 49ers and had he met with them, he said, yeah, like, they love me, I love them, which like usually guys don't give out that information.
Right.
So that tells me like that was probably uh obviously mutual interest, and that meeting stuck out to him. So just keep an eye on that, I guess. Brenton Strange, he looked great in the blocking sled drill. And any tight end that can block is going to be the 49ers type. So uh, Darnell Washington probably did the best in that drill. He made that look a little too easy, right? Like, how are you moving this blocking sled so easily? And who's the other guy? The guy from Iowa. He met with the 49ers. Sam Laporta. He met with the 49ers formally as well. So obviously there's that, Iowa connection with Kittle. So
Right.
something to keep an eye on there. But yeah, they're definitely going to get a tight end. I'm so excited because this is the draft to do it, and I've
So
personally,
deep.
I've been wanting like a tight end too, to pair with Kittle for a while now. So I'm excited about this group of guys.
No, I agree. And real quick, Mariah here is asking who was the one I love them. They love me. Was it Braden Willis for
That was
Oklahoma?
Braden Willis out of Oklahoma. Yeah.
But you talk about the tight end group, right? And how deep it is. I mean, you have kind of all sorts of different ones.
Yeah.
Consistent guys that can catch the ball, guys that have just been consistent and showcased it at the Senior Bowl, like a Payne Durham. You've got the athletic freaks, Darnell Washington, obviously, in that mix. Good blockers, but you also have good versatile guys that can block and guys that can obviously catch the ball as well. So it seems like there's a variety. And Adam Peters, in an interview with Matt Barrows, specifically pointed out the tight end class is one of the deeper classes. So there just does appear to be a sentiment that the 49ers will look to secure one. I don't know exactly which round because of how deep the class is, but they'll look to take one and complement George Kittle with whoever they end up taking.
And that's a great thing, right? Like the fact that it's so deep, they don't need to feel like they need to grab one with their first pick, the third round. They can wait. I think, and because it's so deep, you're gonna find guys who are very talented, who maybe people were slating to go, way earlier, that end up falling just because the class is so deep, and people are looking at other positions. So naturally, I think some guys are going to end up going in those later rounds. And so I think it's possible for the 49ers to end up with what's seen as, potentially like a steal or a value pick at the position. And that to me is also very exciting because, like I said, a lot of these guys look really good. I didn't even mention Zach Kuntz out of Old Dominion. He's a guy who so before the combine, I was doing some research. Okay, who are some guys I need to keep an eye on? A lot of people were saying Zach Kuntz. And so I was like, okay, he's going to be a riser here. Going to keep an eye out for him. And sure enough, he was. So I made it a point to talk to him as well. He did meet with the 49ers at the combine. I believe it was an informal. But again, he tested really well. So a guy to keep an eye on. There's so much talent across the board. And like you said, a lot of different strengths on some of these guys. So I think the most well-rounded one, aside from like maybe the top guys who the 49ers have no chance of getting, is Darnell Washington, right? Which they probably don't have a chance at getting in Washington either, but maybe he gets to the second round. And if they really, really like someone like that, they can move up. But again, I wouldn't feel bad if they don't get someone like that. There's going to be some really good value in the later rounds as well. So that's exciting.
Exactly, exactly, and that's the way to look at it, and you talk about the depth at tight end, and that likely indicates the 49ers don't necessarily move up for one, understanding the value they have at the position, but some of the other positions you mentioned, safety, D-line, maybe even right tackle, if we talk about it. Do you get the sense that there could be a trade up, understanding who the 49ers have interviewed, but also the talent at each position and the desire to get a better player?
It's so unpredictable. The 49ers are unpredictable when it comes to their trades, who they trade up for. You would hardly ever guess like, oh, they're gonna trade up for this guy, right? Because all the times they've traded up, I'm like, that's not who I would have gone for, but okay. Uh, but a lot of the times those players end up doing pretty well for the most part anyway. So but yeah, possibly. I feel like if they were to trade up, most likely maybe it would be for an offensive lineman. And I only say that because I think offensive lineman is not as deep as some of those other position groups that I mentioned. And maybe they will look for someone who can potentially start day one. And you're not really going to get someone like that at the right tackle position, in those later rounds. It'll be much harder. So that's why I think if they did trade up, I would say offensive line. But at the same time, who the hell knows? Because they're so unpredictable when it comes to that kind of stuff. I think you're
There we go.
muted. Okay.
Yeah, but I agreed on the unpredictability. Let's look at the right tackles now because obviously Mike McGlinchey doesn't seem likely that he returns to San Francisco. Colton McKivitz potentially being that guy right now, but the 49ers, they've done well in insulating for the future in the past, looking to get the solution for the future in the past. Colton McKivitz could be that guy in the way that they've groomed him over the last couple of years to take over now at right tackle, or at least it appears. But if they do look to address tackle, you mentioned Blake Freeland. What
Mhm.
can you say about some of the guys that they might look to target at that position?
Yeah, Tyler Steen was another guy I spoke with out of Alabama. He's a tackle. I believe Wanya Morris is a tackle as well. But the biggest thing was versatility. Like
Mm,
they like to
right.
find those guys who have played multiple positions, and don't be surprised if we see a guy that has only played at guard and center and they move him to tackle. They've done some weird things like that in the past where they move guys out of their natural position um at what they feel is the best fit for that player based and their scheme, based on what they're looking for. So it would not surprise me at all, especially because a lot of the guys who, I asked who had met with the 49ers were seen as those versatile guys. Of course, any player you ask, because a lot of the offensive linemen are asked, like, would you be okay with like moving around on the line? Would you be okay playing this and that? All of them are going to give you the same answer. Yes, because it's like a job interview. Of course, you're not going to say no, right? So, um, all of those guys say they're interested in moving or wouldn't be opposed to it, but at the end of the day, do all those guys have the talent level or just like the type of skill sets that fit at that position? That's a whole nother question. So if the 49ers want to move a guy around, is because they feel like that player has a skill set and they've done it before. So it would not surprise me if once again they did that. So again, if they drafted like a guard, don't be surprised. Don't get mad because they might be looking at that guy to move at tackle, right? So we just have to wait and see in that post draft presser what the consensus is, what John Lynch says, and what what role they see for that player, because it might not be a guy that we think based on right tackle. He's played right tackle before. Oh, that's going to be the guy. Not necessarily, I don't think.
No, I think that that's fair. I mean, we saw it last year, right? I mean, Nick Zakelj had played tackle in his career. Spencer Burford had played tackle in his career. You see one move to guard and the other one potentially move to center. I mean, it has been a part of their ideal or kind of the way that they've gone about their process. And you mentioned a couple of names: Tyler Steen, Wanya Morris, some of those intriguing candidates. And I think this draft's going to be very interesting because it's not top heavy. It definitely isn't
Yeah.
top heavy, but there's a good amount of depth at certain positions, but they're valuable positions. I mean, we talk about right tackle or tackle in general, offensive line. I think there's a solid amount. Even on the interior, I think there's a fairly solid amount of depth. Maybe not high end caliber depth, but enough depth to where you can transform some players into starters. Safety, we mentioned how there's a good amount of players. And defensive line, there's always a good amount of players. So a lot of important positions. I wonder which ones are the ones where you start seeing runs earlier and where teams start to overdraft that position. And that might force the 49ers hands one way or another into getting a player that they
Point.
want.
Yeah, that is a good point because, like I said, I think offensive line is kind of one of those positions that's not as deep, right? So definitely might force the 49ers hand and getting them to trade up. And like I said, even the DBs as well, some of them like a guy like Skinner, again, if they really like someone like that, you're gonna have to trade up. But I think they've met with guys kind of all across the board, right? You got to do your due diligence on um, you know, every not just the top guys, but pretty much everyone because you don't know who you're going to pick when necessarily. At least at this point, I don't think that's really been decided yet. So, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. We'll just have to wait and see. I mean, how many picks do the 49ers have? Is it
10, I think. 10 right now.
okay? Oh, it's like 10. So, they don't need 10 picks. They don't need to fill 10 holes on their team. And another thing I'll mention, especially for the offensive line, they like to groom their guys.
Right.
It's not often that they draft a guy to be a day one starter. So that's another thing. And that's where the Colton McKivitz thing I think makes sense because they can have McKivitz back on a 1 year deal and draft his eventual replacement, have him groom that guy, or they'll develop that guy that year, and then with the intention that okay, this season we're gonna start you. I feel like Nick Zakelj just might get that chance at center. He'll at least get an opportunity to compete. So that's kind of how they like to play certain positions, not necessarily expecting them to be day one starters, but just as a developmental kind of role.
Right, right. And I mean, that's kind of like the way that they have to go about their business right now, in that they understand how important the draft is. John Lynch stressed it in his conference when talking about Drake Jackson, a guy who they
Yeah.
invested that second rounder this year. It seems like they're going to try and rely on him to have a bigger role this year, looking for him to step up because you don't have as much cap. You have to rely on lower contracts, which means draft
Yeah.
picks, and you got to make sure they hit and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw Mariah, she asked a question. Can you explain the difference between informal and formal meetings? As far as
Yeah.
I know, the formal ones is like the ones where you're speed dating. So there's I believe it's like hours that teams have to meet with players, and I say players because it's multiple players that you get to meet with in that span of time. And I believe teams, from what I heard, they get 60, 15-minute interviews as their formal interviews. And
Hmm.
that's why, so a lot of people were like, because I mentioned that the Princeton wide receiver,
Oh,
Andre
Andre.
Yeshivas. I asked him if he met with 49ers. He didn't remember. You'd be surprised how many guys don't remember. And it's because of that. It's literally speed dating. It's at night. This week is exhausting for them. So I don't hold it against them if they don't remember who they've met with. It's a really grueling week for them. Uh, and quite frankly, not every team is going to stand out to you. I mean, some teams probably have boring interviews. Why would I remember what team that was, right? So I'll just say that because I was getting, people giving players some flack on that, and I
Hmm.
don't know. But
No,
yeah,
that
so
makes
that's the
sense.
difference. I'm not sure when the informals happen. I think it's more so you just kind of find them in the hallway, maybe kind of thing. But yeah, so the formals are like the designated times that you get to meet with a player, and it's 15 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's good insight there, because obviously these formal meetings, there are so many of them because you have the 60-minute period for every single position group. or however
Mhm.
long period for every single position group going through at the combine. There's like 300 players there, so
Yeah.
it's definitely a grueling process.
And so that's why, like, yeah, I put the list together of everyone the 49ers have met with, formal or informal, right? But I will say keep an eye on the formal ones. Because and also when we start getting into the top 30 visits and things like that,
Yeah.
those show you the real interest, I think. You're setting out time. You're using this allocated time that you only have so many to use on this player. That speaks to real interest. So I'll just say that.
Yeah. Let's go to the safety position real quick because we talk about insulating going forward. 49ers met with a good amount of safeties. Sean Gibson, John Lynch expressed the interest for him to return to the team. What do you think San Francisco should do with the position, with the hiring of Steve Wilkes, with the safety group in free agency, and with the draft? Do you think that it's imperative they look to draft a guy? Do you think they should sign another guy, or what do you think your plan should be?
I think with a guy like Wilkes, like who's in his first year in San Francisco, it would not surprise me if he wanted to draft a guy, because that's a guy you can like develop, right? And turn into whoever you want. So yeah, I could certainly see that. Now, I don't think they necessarily would look to a guy to start right away. So I do think they're going to bring a veteran in as well. Now, whether that be a Deshaun Gibson or someone else, like another free agent, that is yet to be decided, right? But I think they'll definitely have some choices there. And the biggest thing to me has been, okay, Wilkes plays a lot more single high. How does that fit Gibson's skill set? Like, is that going to be good for him? Does he want to even do that? He's what, 30 or something like that, 31. So asking him to take on more responsibility compared to what he had last season, will he be willing to do that? That's kind of my biggest question. Does Steve Wilkes see him as a guy who can take on that extra responsibility? That's kind of the decision that they need to make. It would not surprise me at all if Wilkes wants to get some new blood in there, just because you have that opportunity, right? To bring someone in, and you want to kind of handpick your guys where you can, right? So
Right.
yeah, I could definitely see them bringing in a free agent safety. It would not surprise me if they drafted one either, because at the end of the day, they need depth at the position as well. So that's where, a rookie that you can then develop to be an eventual starter can, or just be depth, can come in.
And in a way, I don't know if this makes sense necessarily, but one of my takes this after hearing the Deshaun Gibson news, I honestly think it makes more sense to draft a safety because prior to that, I think that there would have been a bigger need to address the position in free agency. Definitely go all in, try and get a guy in free agency. But if Gibson does return and if the 49ers are comfortable with him understanding that it's not going to cost as much as an option likely in free agency, I would definitely go ahead and draft a safety in this draft, have him have that development under two top safeties in the league, and then pair them with Hufanga when Gibson likely retires at the end of next season.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Whoever they bring in, whether it be a free agent or, Gibson, who will also be a free agent, but you know what I mean. Um, I think those are probably short-term solutions, right? So I think bringing a guy in to develop and be a eventual starter will be a good path for them as well. um and yeah, I'm not opposed to Gibson, just because you mentioned it, he would be a cheaper option. And right now the 49ers need to kind of decide what positions they're going to spend money on and which ones
Right.
are going to be like their value, the value free agent signings. And Gibson could be one of those value guys who's already like on your lap, right? So um, they could definitely go that route. It would not surprise me. But then again, like I said, with the Steve Wilkes, change, that could, we don't know his philosophy, right? Like maybe he does want to bring a guy in. So I think that'll answer a lot of questions, what they do there.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Real quick, shifting to the other side, we can't go 49ers without talking quarterback. And I don't want to focus on the starters, but the 49ers did meet with some guys at the combine. I think the Fordham guy, Tim DeMorat, and then DTR, obviously, of UCLA, among some other options. Do you think it's realistic for the 49ers to select a signal caller, or do you think that it's more realistic they go after the option in free agency with the way that their roster is comprised, or both?
Yeah, they met with a couple guys like Jaron Hall and DTR at the
Hmm.
combine, and they have met with other quarterbacks. But if you look at the quarterbacks they have met with, for the most part, it's like, guys who are going to go on day 3, maybe even
Right.
undrafted. You mentioned Tim DeMorat. I interviewed him on my channel, so little plug there. Just check out that interview. He was actually a pretty good one. Um, but yes, I think if they do draft one, it's going to be in round 6, 7, or get an undrafted guy. You don't need to add another question to your quarterback room when there's already so many questions surrounding this team. And also, I get the sense that they are all in on Brock Purdy, and they feel good enough about Trey Lance to have him be a backup to Purdy. So that's kind of how I see it. And as we know, they are going to bring in a veteran. Now, the caliber of that veteran, I think, will tell us everything about Brock Purdy and what his timeline is going to be like. They kind of need to know what that surgery is going to, how that surgery is going to go, and what that timeline is going to be before they kind of decide on the type of quarterback they get. But I think that will also tell us a lot about where they kind of see this going. Uh, but they're going to bring in a veteran. They're going to bring in a quarterback. 'Cause quarterback's like one of those positions like you kind of just want to draft every year because why not?
Right.
You never know. So they'll probably draft a guy, but it'll be late. I know guys have mentioned like Jake Hayner. Jake Hayner is probably going in like the 3rd round,
Right.
or around that range. The 49ers are not going to draft a quarterback that high. If they do, like, we're in big trouble. You know what I mean? Um, and I asked Hayner if the 49ers had met with him. He said no. So there you go. Let's just squash that right now. And so yeah, it's going to be a later round guy. So I wouldn't put too much thought into it if I were the fans.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The way that the guys that they've talked to, it makes sense that it's a third round guy, or not a third round, day 3 guy. And that, I mean, in general, that makes sense. The 49ers aren't pressed to necessarily add at the position and understand that whoever it is likely ends up being QB3 for the year. And I think the same philosophy goes towards their free agency plans, in that whoever they end up getting is going to be a valuable backup who gets reps, but also will be QB3 for the majority of the year. So I'm intrigued to see what they do. I think free agency obviously is going to be very telling. If they go after a more higher caliber guy that you understand they give some guaranteed money to, don't know exactly what their draft plan would be, because you likely have to cut the guy and put him on your practice squad if you already have your 3 quarterbacks. But if that's not the case, maybe you have a similar story to last year, not necessarily in Purdy, but in that you have a rookie competing for that 3rd spot and ultimately wins it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, this quarterback situation is always a roller coaster, right? But I think it's pretty clear that they see Brock Purdy as their guy just based on what he did last season. I mean, even the fact that after he got hurt, we knew he was going to be out for several weeks, months. There's this we keep seeing all this Brock Purdy content coming out, and it's like, well, why is that? It's almost like they want people to remember, hey, like Brock Purdy, he's still our guy, kind of thing. That's a sense that I get. So I think they've made it as clear as they can without actually saying it, so yeah, we'll just have to see. I want Trey Lance to get at least an opportunity. He's going to get an
Right.
opportunity as long as Brock Purdy is going to be not cleared, right? So it, it's Trey Lance's the ball is in his court to kind of
Right.
show what he has. And but I think after this, like, it's going to be hard unless there's some injuries that happen to Purdy after his surgery. um, yeah, it'll be hard for Lance to I think climb back. And it's
Hmm.
weird. It's so weird to say because like, what is that based on? Like barely anything. He's barely
Exactly.
played, right? So what do we? I don't know. It's such a weird situation with Trey, but I just the sense that I don't know if you get the same sense, but I get the sense that it's all Brock
No,
Purdy.
I get the sense that the favorite is Purdy. I just don't know at the moment, based on what I've heard and what the reports have come out, how realistic that is right now. I mean, you even hear national media members and 49er, like bigger 49er beat writers, come out and say it's Trey Lance's job at the moment just because Brock Purdy might not be ready week one. And the more and more the surgery gets delayed, the more and more possibility that Tommy John might be on the table. We don't know until Brock
Hmm.
Purdy gets in that room whether Tommy John's on the table. That obviously changes the entirety of the 49ers plans because it's a much longer recovery. And so there's definitely a lot to be said about it. It seems though like the 49ers favorite based on Lynch's words, the players' words, is Brock Purdy, understanding what he did this past year. But I do hope that Trey Lance gets his opportunity. He should at the moment, and
Yeah.
I think that you've got to roll with him if with the way that the situation's playing out right now.
Yeah, I agree. And also, um, who they get as a free agent. Like I said, that's
Right.
going to tell us everything because if they get a guy like Baker Mayfield, who, some people have mentioned the 49ers would be interested in, if they get a guy like that, that's a guy who has started an experience.
Hmm.
Albeit he's not like, a world beater or anything, but that's a guy who can potentially push Trey Lance
Push,
for the
yeah,
starting position. And that tells you everything that you need to know about how the 49ers feel about Trey Lance if they went that direction. So that would tell me a lot. So I think the veteran who they bring in tells me how they feel about Brock's recovery and then also how they feel about Lance. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
yeah. No, I agree there. I agree there. To end today's show, I have an interesting topic away from the NFL Combine, but Jimmy Ward instead. Jimmy Ward, obviously known for his personality, went on an Instagram live and actually spoke about him playing in the nickel. Said that he actually never refused to play nickel. He actually always wanted to play nickel because he watches a lot of film, and remembered earlier this year that when K'Wan Williams departed, that he thought that he would need to play at some point, so he got some reps in the nickel, which we saw at times in camp. And so he explained that. He also explained how he is not ruling out a return to the 49ers. What do you kind of take of the comments that Ward said on Monday?
I That's definitely interesting, like that part where he said he's not ruling it out. But I feel like that's also contingent on Tashawn Gibson, right? Because maybe he's kind of waiting to see what Gibson does too. Because if Gibson comes back, that obviously doesn't, leave him his spot back. Although, if he doesn't mind playing nickel, then hey, okay, we'll have you back at nickel. But
Right.
the personally, like the scenario that I like the most, um, I don't know. I'm not opposed to Jimmy Ward coming back, but just for some time now, I just was preparing myself for that not to be the case.
Right.
So I've kind of looked at other options already, and I'm like, I don't know, I might like that better. They bring Emmanuel Mosley back, they move Lenore back to the nickel. Maybe Gibson is back, or they have a free agent at safety opposite Hufunga. So that's kind of how I'm seeing it right now just from the money standpoint. I don't know if Jimmy Ward makes sense unless, he's willing to take, a hometown discount, retire with the team you've been with, Uh, but otherwise, I feel like that would be very difficult. Now, as far as him saying he didn't refuse to play safety, to be fair, like, I don't think John Lynch ever said he refused.
Right.
So but yeah, interesting, I guess. It seemed like there was just some miscommunications there. But yeah, if he wants to come back, that's great. But at the same time, what if it's a negotiating tactic, right? He wants to say like, "Hey, I might want to go back to my old team. Offer me this to make sure I don't," kind of thing. I don't know. Everyone says everything at this point to as a negotiating tactic. So you got to watch out for that, which he'd be smart to do, right? It works. So we'll see where he goes, where he ends up, but I would be pretty surprised if it was back with the 49ers.
I agree. Based on the tone that he had this past year, it's pretty clear he wants to play safety. And I mean, he said, I don't know, maybe I could be playing nickel for the Niners next year, but it also sounds like that's worst case scenario for him. Understanding his market, he's been pretty adamant that he wants to be paid what he's worth. And San Francisco at the end of the year, based on his initial live, did not pay him that. They paid him nickel money, but not necessarily safety money, which is what he is looking for. So I'd assume he goes on the open market, looks elsewhere, and comes back worst case scenario, but I don't know if that's going to happen this time around. The last contract that he signed, he did take a pay cut, he said, over the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't know if that
Right.
happens this time. I think that this one's going to be the one that he wants to secure the bag before he ends up finishing his career. Don't know where that'll be, but yeah, maybe it's a negotiating tactic. Who knows? Maybe he ends up being a Niner. I just don't think that that's the most realistic situation at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. But as he should, right? Like he should, try to get that bag. I can't fault him for that. So yeah, Jimmy Ward was always one of those guys. Like, yeah, I would love him to retire as a Niner, but that's as far as the business side, that it doesn't always work out that way. So happy for him wherever he ends up, because obviously he's gonna get paid well.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last topic for today, a very similar one, but with a player we heard more recently about. Robbie Gould did not, he told in a way Adam Schefter he intends to play elsewhere. 49ers did not place the franchise tag on him, which means they don't get to choose whether they keep him or not. But Matt Barrows came out, I think on KBR, and he said something around how he doesn't think that it's all shut. He thinks it could be a 50-50, calling it sort of his gut call rather than what he's heard. Do you think that that reunion might still happen, or are you shutting the door on that one?
I'm shutting the door. The only way I see that scenario taking place is if Gold goes out there and his market isn't like what he thought it would be. Um, but at the same time, like, I'm not sure how much the 49ers are willing to spend on the kicker position, right? Because if they were willing to spend on it, they would have probably already signed him to an extension.
Right.
So the fact that they want to have him test free agency out, I think they want to go with a cheaper option. And they wouldn't be wrong for that. I mean, Robbie Gold already got his raise. It's like you only get one raise here, pal. You used yours up. Same with Moser, right? Like it was kind of like a similar scenario where those guys asked for their raises, they got it. All right, that's it. You're not getting another one, so see ya, kind of thing. So no, I don't expect Robbie Gold to come back. Unless, again, like I said, he has a terrible market, which maybe, I don't know. He's up there in age, but he's also been a pretty um consistent kicker, one of the better kickers the last couple of years that he's been with the Niners. So he may
Right.
find himself with a pretty good market. So I think the 49ers go cheaper. There's definitely some options out there for them. I like Pinheiro, played with the Panthers. And Matt Gay, he's out there too, but I think he's gonna
He's
get
gonna get
paid
the
pretty well
money.
too. So that doesn't make sense unless, like, okay, you wanted to really upgrade, but how much of an upgrade would that be really? So yeah, but there's options. There's guys out there, and they could go the rookie route as well. God forbid. That's not my favorite route. I mean, I wouldn't mind it. I could see it from the money standpoint. But I think, D- one of my followers, Doug, he posted um he put like all the, I don't know, it's a lot of math, but pretty much like the expected, over expected, all that for the
Oh,
kickers,
for the kickers.
for, yeah, the rookie kickers, and then he did it for the free agents. All of the rookie kickers were like negative, whereas like the free agents were, most of them were in the positive. There was probably like one that was in the negative. So that right there tells you, like, you're not going to find a reliable guy in the draft, more than likely. Also, there hasn't been that many kickers from the draft who end up getting a second contract. So that's
Right.
notable as well. That's just something you can't really rely on. So based on that, I have kind of shifted more so to the let's just get a cheaper free agent option as kicker.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I mean, even if you want to draft a kicker, I think you do have to still sign a different guy. You need to have a competition, an open one, because
Yeah.
the kicker position's one where you don't have to really worry too much about development compared to others. You just want a guy that can kick kick consistently, because
Yeah.
kicks can be the difference between a win and a loss at times, especially for the 49ers who like to kick field goals more often than others. And so I think, yeah, it's definitely an intriguing position. As for Gould, don't think he returns. I think that he probably wants to go somewhere closer to the Midwest where his family is.
Yeah. Me too.
I also don't think the 49ers pay $5 million for a kicker, again, understanding their salary cap situation at the moment.
Yep. I see that too.
But Steph, it's been a very fun show. I appreciate you coming along and giving all your thoughts from the combine on a bunch of different positions. Anything you want to plug before we head on out of here?
Yeah, I mean, my channel, Steph 49K on YouTube. I saw someone was also asking me where can they see the list. I'm
Oh,
assuming he's asking the
yeah.
list of the players. If you go on my Twitter, twitter.com/Steph49K, yeah, and thank you, Rohan. He
Yeah.
just posted actually it's just a Google Doc that it's tracking all of the players the 49ers have met with, again, formal, informal, not just the combine. I'm looking at the
All the
All-Star
different
bowl
bowls, right?
games. Yeah, so trying to get all of that information into one giant list, and hopefully over time, because I want to make this a more annual thing, hopefully over time we start seeing some trends of like what the 49ers kind of like. I mean, to some extent we've already started to kind of put those pieces together, but hopefully with a list that extensive we'll be able to do that. But yeah, appreciate it. Thank you guys.
Yeah, 100%. I appreciate you for coming along. The chat, thank you guys so much for staying alive as well with your questions. We will be back with some more content very soon. Or later today, I've got a show with Marco. That should be a lot of fun. But Steph, I appreciate your time, and we will be back soon. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Ron.